Okay, the next item of business is a statement by Fiona Hislop on A9 dualling programme for 2035 completion. Cabinet Secretary will take questions at the end of her statement. Therefore, there should be no interventions or interruptions. And I call on the Cabinet Secretary up to 10 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The A9 is a vital element of our national infrastructure, connecting the communities of the Highlands and Islands and Central Scotland and supporting their economic and social well-being. Dualling the A9 between Perth and Inverness will improve the safety, the reliability and resilience of the route, and this Government has been consistent in its commitment to completing this vital work. In support of that commitment, in December 2023, the Government announced its delivery plan for completion of the A9 dualling programme by the end of 2035. That plan involved procurement of 4 design and build contracts and, subject to further decision-making in late 2025, procurement of 2 mutual investment model contracts. As indicated yesterday by the Government in the Budget and Spending Review Statement, I can confirm that the programme will be delivered using capital-funded contracts instead of mutual investment model contracts, still achieving dualling of the A9 between Perth and Inverness by 2035. I am pleased today to provide an update for Parliament on the A9 dualling programme and further detail on the decision-making and how this decision affects our delivery plan for completion of this vital programme of work. The 2023 delivery plan set target dates for progress of the dualling programme. The Government has met all of these target dates so far, and at present construction is underway on the 3rd and 4th sections of the programme, Tomatin Tamoy and Tay Crossing to Ballinaig, which together will provide approximately 11 miles of dualling. Procurement of the 5th section, Pitlochry to Killiecrankie, commenced in July this year, and we are on track to award that contract in autumn 2026, which will bring another 4 miles of the programme into construction. The Government has also made significant progress with statutory processes. Since December 2023, we have published draft orders for 1 project, made orders for a further 3 projects and completed land acquisition for 6 projects. The 2023 delivery plan anticipated use of 2 mutual investment model contracts, MIM, to achieve completion of the dualling programme. As the Government indicated at the time, this was subject to further decision-making in late 2025 to take account of updated assessments of expected market conditions. Extensive work to inform this further decision-making was undertaken throughout 2025. Our updated business case has confirmed that the rationale for completing the dualling programme remains strong and that it is considered to provide value for money. Our market consultation indicated a strong appetite from European contractors for involvement in delivery of mutual investment model contracts, MIM contracts, and an appetite from domestic contractors for involvement in delivery of capital-funded contracts. Our updated financial modelling indicates that the cost of MIM contracts is now estimated to be around 28% higher than the cost of equivalent capital-funded contracts. Now, that's an increase from the 16% difference estimated in 2023. This increased difference is primarily linked to the expected cost of borrowing that would apply for each MIM contract, now being around 2% per annum higher, reflecting macroeconomic factors that are impacting on borrowing costs. It was therefore concluded that using MIM contracts for the A9 dualling programme would provide relatively poorer commercial value for money than would be provided by capital-funded contracts, and the Government will therefore progress the A9 dualling programme to completion using capital-funded contracts. This is an important decision which demonstrates the strength of this Government's commitment to meeting its target of completing the A9 dualling programme by the end of 2035. The decision not to use MIM contracts has implications for how completion of the A9 dualling programme by 2035 will be achieved. The 2026 delivery plan continues to balance factors including industry capacity to deliver, the need to minimise disruption to road users, and it has also taken into account the likely need for a public local inquiry for the Passive Burnham to Tay Crossing project. It brings forward the start of works for the Dalradi to Slocht in the north section, providing earlier completion of the new grade separated junctions serving Aviemore and Carbridge. It facilitates earlier completion of a section of dualling which includes the new grade separated junction down at Nispidal as part of a combined Glengarry to Crewbanmore contract rather than as a standalone advanced works contract. This 2026 delivery plan is based on establishing a framework agreement to streamline the procurement process and will provide a pipeline of work as the market has requested. We will continue to engage with the construction industry on the A9 dualling programme, including with the Civil Engineering Contractors Association, which has welcomed the use of capital-funded contracts. In support of that aim, Transport Scotland will next week launch a further market consultation with interested parties on the design of the framework agreement. This consultation will inform procurement of the framework agreement, which is planned to commence in spring this year, with appointments confirmed by the end of the year. Once in place, this framework will be used to procure 5 contracts for completion of the 6 projects yet to commence procurement. Full details of the target dates for each contract to be procured are set out in the 2026 delivery plan, which has been published today on both Transport Scotland's website and the dedicated A9 dualling website. The 2026 delivery plan maintains the target of having dualling operational between Perth and Inverness by the end of 2035. With continuous construction activity taking place across the corridor, dualling will continue to be brought into operation on a phased basis, with 50% of the route between Perth and Inverness operating as dual carriageway by the end of 2030, 67% by the end of 2032, 91% by the end of 2034, and 100% by the end of 2035. So today's confirmation of the procurement and funding route for the remaining sections of the A9 dualling programme provides further reassurance for communities and businesses throughout the corridor of the timelines for construction of these projects. I can also confirm that the updated cost estimate for the programme is now £3.97 billion at April 2025 prices. When adjusted for inflation, that is equivalent to £2.5 billion at April 2008 prices, which remains well within the original cost estimate of £3 billion at 2008 prices. This government remains committed to provide the necessary funding in support of the estimated costs in order to deliver the dualling programme on track in 2035. Now, there are 3 related matters that I will briefly cover. First, the Government has been progressing work to secure planning consent for the proposed active travel route between Aviemore and Carbridge. Subject to obtaining the planning consent and completing land acquisition, these works will be included with the now earlier Dalradi to Slough section. Second, Transport Scotland will continue to investigate the potential of temporary traffic signals at the A923 Dunkeld junction and an associated reduced speed limit. Assuming these proposals are confirmed, our target is to deliver these improvements during the 2026-27 financial year. Third, we will continue to prioritise road safety along the corridor. In 2025, we completed a £5.2 million package of short-term measures. We continue to work in partnership with Police Scotland and our wider road safety partners to respond where appropriate to any safety concerns on the route through our established processes, including the A9 Safety Group. The 2023 delivery plan provided certainty on the target dates for key early milestones, as well as allowing for a further decision-making process to be completed in late 2025. That decision-making process has led to the 2026 delivery plan that I am announcing today, which provides further detail and certainty on the target dates for key milestones for the remainder of the dualling programme. The Government is fully aware that much work remains to be done to deliver this vital major infrastructure programme, and we are relying on the contracting industry to work collaboratively with us to achieve that outcome. The Government has made clear that the completion of the A9 dualling programme by the end of 2035 is an absolute priority, and we have now set out clearly how we intend to achieve that goal. I hope that today's update further reassures the communities served by the A9 that there is a clear, robust plan for dualling the A9 between Perth and Inverness by the end of 2035. The visible work we can all see on the route will continue to ramp up, and I want to take the opportunity to thank all road users for their patience whilst we undertake this vital work to upgrade Scotland's arterial route supporting the Highlands, benefiting all of Scotland.
Thank you very much. The Cabinet Secretary will now take questions on the issues raised in her statement. I intend to allow around 20 minutes, after which we'll need to move on to the next item of business. Grateful as ever if members wishing to ask a question could press the request to speak buttons. And I call first Sue Webber.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary also for advance sight of her statement. The dualling of the A9 was meant to be completed last year, but thanks to SNP incompetence, the can has been kicked down the undualed road to 2035. And now taxpayers will have to fork out almost £4 billion as a result of this catastrophic project mismanagement. As costs soar and progress stalls, more lives are still being lost on this lifeline road. Shona Robertson yesterday boasted about the additional £200 million to complete the A9, but that, frankly, is a drop in the ocean compared to what is actually needed. Laura Hansler from the A9 Dualling Action Group said that yesterday's announcement amounted to keeping the project technically alive while ensuring it never meaningfully progresses. And echoing the Scottish Conservative proposals, the Scottish Chamber of Commerce has said that dualling must be accelerated with clear routes for private capital to support it. Nothing in the statement today addresses either of these statements. How can anyone believe a word the Cabinet Secretary says when our party has time and time again broken their promise when it comes to dualling this key road?
Cabinet Secretary.
So I think Sue Webber has selective memory of the financial constraints that her party put on the capital projects for this Parliament and this Government. If she had been listening to the statement, she will have heard that I had stated that it is within the original budget, so it is not increasing in the way that she has said. She implies that somehow the project is stalling. When was the last time Sue Webber actually drove the A9? She'll see the work see Tomatin Tamoy. She'll see the Tomatin Tamoy, she'll see the groundworks happening. How can it be stalling when those works are happening at the north and the south of the A9 as we speak? And as she will know, as undoubtedly she has driven the A9 recently, which makes me think, why did she ask that question? In terms of the budget, the comments made by the Cabinet Secretary yesterday, she referred to the one-year budget and the investment that's there. I can refer the member to the budget items, and if she can look, she can find them in terms of the budget documents, in terms of level 2 and level 3, and also in the spending review. That is where the funding is. Now, what we've said quite clearly, that particularly when we get to those latter sections of the A9, it will be funded by revenue transferred to capital, and that the full funding of the requirements for the 2035 completion has been set out, and we have identified how we're going to fund it, and we've set out the programme. That is very, very certain indeed. So I would refer the member to the new plan, have a look at the budget figures and identify that we have delivered and we are delivering. And that project has construction work happening now, and I would encourage everybody, if they want to make sure that they can have that confidence that that's happening, to make sure and go and see it in the A9.
Okay, just to confirm to the Chamber, there's a lot of interest in asking questions. We'll only get through all of those questions if members ask the questions and then listen to the responses. And I call Daniel Johnson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for advance out the statement. The SNP first committed to dualling the A9 at least as early as 2007, almost 20 years ago. And despite promises to complete by last year, we're barely a third of the way through, and yesterday and today's announcements merely commit to the completion being a decade late. So while today's announcement refers to using capital budgets rather than MIM or other financial models, we also know from the Fraser of Allender Institute that capital budgets were cut by £850 million in the budget and the medium-term financial statement. That's a 10% cut, despite exhausting the Scottish Reserve and despite receiving more through the block grant. So can the Cabinet Secretary confirm what impact yesterday's cut will have on A9 dualling and other transport projects? And can she outline what contingency measures will be put in place so people can have confidence that the A9 will be complete by 2035?
Cabinet Secretary.
I would refer the member to the spending review table 9.01, page 28. The Trunk Road Network Safety Adaptation Maintenance Improvement is contained in that spending review, as is the next one-year budget for 26-27. And in terms of the A9, we'll have, because it covers a number of years, both capital and resource as part of that, and you will see the increase in the budget, which reflects, obviously, as we move to the latter stages of the spending review. So the announcement I'm making today, I deliberately wrote to the Net Zero and Energy and Transport Committee to advise them that I would be making the statement about whether it's MIM or capital at this point, precisely because what I have just announced is baked in to, yes, the budget provision for 1 year, but also the comprehensive spending review and also future years. And that is how it's been organised, which is why I can come to the statement, and I'm very conscious of time, to deliver the statement I just have.
Emma Roddick, to be followed by Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm very pleased to hear that we are still on track, and in particular that the Slough section is to be brought forward. The grade-separated junctions at Aviemore and Carbridge and the associated active travel route will make such a huge difference in terms of practicality and safety. So could the Cabinet Secretary give some more detail on the next steps for that section in particular?
Cabinet Secretary.
That appreciation of the opportunity to bring forward the Dalradi to Slough route means that the junctions, and we know from safety issues, A9 concerns very much have been around a number of junctions, and I think working on the Aviemore and Carbridge, there's 3 junctions there, will help improve road safety. And in terms of what this means, it means that section will become the first of the remaining sections to go out to procurement, and that will be the next stage when we're considering, after the framework agreements have been established, to move to develop that area. And I think that will be very welcome, as will be the active travel section, which a number of people have obviously been interested in.
Murdo Fraser, to be followed by Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you. As Sue Webber said, A9 dualling was supposed to have been completed last year. So we're already 10 years behind where we should be, and too many lives have been lost in the meantime. And I hope this latest announcement will not turn out to be yet another broken promise from this SNP government to the people of Perthshire and the Highlands. Now, in her statement, the Cabinet Secretary said there are projects in the north section which had to be brought forward. Is that being done at the expense of any projects in the south section? And if so, which are they?
Cabinet Secretary.
So in relation to completing what we have said we will do, he will have been in the Chamber, I'm sure, in 2023 when the then Cabinet Secretary set out the 2023 delivery plan. I can reassure him that all the milestones in that delivery plan had been approved. There is obviously an adjustment, he's quite right to identify that. So the Glengarry for Crubin Moor section, that will go to procurement in 2027 with dualling operational in 2034. So that will be a longer period for construction, and some of the central ones may take longer. We obviously have to look at what will happen to the Pass of Burnham depending on the timing and results of any public inquiry should there be. But what the Glengarry to Crubin Moor does is allow us also then to try and at least get into a fairly early development, the Dalna-Spiddle junction, which I know had been raised previously from a safety point of view. So yes, there's been it's a resequencing of the remainder of the contracts, but there are benefits within that, and I hope he can appreciate that that is trying to optimise the remainder of the programme with completion still by 2035.
Kenneth Gibson, to be followed by Rhoda Grant.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the Cabinet Secretary advise what impact high levels of post-COVID inflation, coupled with years and years of cuts to Scotland's capital allocation by the Tories at Westminster, the architects of the HS2 fiasco, soon to be outdone by Labour, who will cut our capital allocation to 2023 levels over the next 5 years, has had on A9 dualling and a host of other capital projects ranging from new housing to hospitals and harbours? Cabinet
Secretary.
So clearly the last Conservative UK government didn't inflation-proof their capital budget, which then refocused at the time would have resulted in a nearly 10% real terms cut in our capital funding over the medium term over this period. And obviously, despite facing significant demands on our capital budget, from inflationary pressures to economic uncertainty, energy and cost crisis, And remember, it was the last UK government that stripped £6 billion out of our budget. We are using all the levers at our disposal to top up our capital funding through Scotland. We'll continue to prioritise capital funding to eliminate child poverty, grasp the opportunities of net zero, boost economic growth through our infrastructure plans and maintain services. But you can only do that with the available funding that we have, and that's been severely hampered by Westminster governments.
Rhoda Grant, to be followed by Rona.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The timeline suggests that about 40 to 50 miles of the A9 could be under construction at the same time, yet the statement makes no mention of contingency for knock-on construction delays, and neither does it provide any mitigation for lengthy delays for road users at that time. It's clear that there are many risks to this project, and therefore I ask, would the Cabinet Secretary support the creation of a parliamentary committee dedicated to this project, as happened with the Queensferry crossing, and will she commit the Scottish Government to a duty of candour as called for by the Public Participation Committee?
Cabinet Secretary.
I am being as open as I can be. I've come to the Chamber whenever there's anything else to announce. In terms of having a dedicated committee, that's not a matter for me, that's a matter for the Parliament. I have indicated to the current convener of the Transport Committee that I do think transport would get more attention, perhaps if the future committees were readjusted. I do think the current committee is diligent in its work, and it has received regular updates on a 6-monthly basis from Transport Scotland officials, and I'm open to be, to be examined by them as well in terms of the provision. So that it will be up to the future Parliament. But I do think that setting out this programme has been balanced by what it means for, yes, contractors in terms of the market, but also how you manage that constant work, which Sue Webber obviously doesn't seem to understand is actually happening now. You've got to balance that for drivers. You've got to try and prevent frustrations. So she's right to identify that issue. But if you want the A9 dualled, that means there'll be construction work, and our contractors are working very hard to minimise disruptions, as I think people who we go through Tomato and Tamoy appreciate already.
Thank you. We've got about 8 minutes left and 10 members that want to ask questions, so we will need to have slightly briefer questions, similarly with the responses. I call Rona Mackay to be followed by Mark Ruskell.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The dualling of the A9 is a fundamental project to connect Scotland and to ensure we have the physical infrastructure to meet the needs of the country. Can the Cabinet Secretary tell us more about how the Scottish Government is enhancing connectivity through its infrastructure projects such as this?
Cabinet Secretary.
Very limited. I'll be happy to point the member to a number of projects. I'm very pleased that this comprehensive spending review has funding in it that will help, obviously, improvements that the rest will be thankful on the A23 Main Artery West, and obviously from Inverness, the A96 funding in the budget for advanced works next year, and also in the spending review to progress Inches to Smithton and the Nairn bypass in particular.
Mark Ruskell to be followed by Willie Rennie.
I think anybody who's attempted to turn north onto the A9 at Dunkeld will recognise the absolute road safety nightmare that's faced by communities day in, day out. So while I welcome the mention of that junction in the statement, what is proposed falls way short of what the community have campaigned for years and years. They want a roundabout, they want permanent speed reduction on the A9. So what reassurance can the Cabinet Secretary give that these improvements that the communities want will be delivered and we end up with a safer road rather than just a faster road?
Cabinet Secretary.
My statement addressed some of the issues around the A923, A9 junction. There have been local representations about trying to manage that. We discussed it at the last A9 safety group because there would be what could be done with our contractors, and that is why they're examining could we get a speed reduction in the meantime, and also potential signalling. The idea of a temporary roundabout, however, remember there's been a significant number of objections and concerns around the Passive Burnham Dunkeld area, and therefore if it does go to public inquiry, you can't have work, for example, in a temporary roundabout. It's something that's been subject to a public inquiry.
Willie Rennie to be followed by Claire Adams.
The Minister doesn't like it, but she does need to be reminded that this was a promise that was supposed to be delivered last year, and we are years behind and people are suffering as a result. But the Minister highlighted the fact that we needed to have candour and transparency. So in the interest of that transparency, can she set out what is now high on the risk register for this project for dualling it up and down the A9?
Cabinet Secretary.
So in terms of the risk factors, clearly any disruptions out with the control of contractors. For example, severe weather over lengths of time can cause issues. In terms of the planning of this, we are as tightly planning as we can. I did say in my opening remarks that we would have to work with contractors to ensure that we can deliver the projects, and that has happened already. I'm sure it will continue to do so. The framework agreement will provide more certainty, which I think will be helpful. But in terms of the ongoing risk aspects, that's something that I will consider. I think the future governments will consider, and indeed future committees of this Parliament will need to consider as we progress over the number of years ahead to deliver by 2035.
Claire Adamson, to be followed by Edward Knight.
Thank you very much, and I can thank the Cabinet Secretary for his statement. I'm really interested in the track record of delivering road infrastructure improvements and welcome the commitments of both the A9 and the A96 we've heard this afternoon. But can the Cabinet Secretary tell us a bit more about the wider plans in Scotland and how these particular roads will help connectivity with the Central Belt?
Cabinet Secretary.
I make a point that the Highlands and the Central Belt both benefit from that dualling of the A9, and in terms of additional projects, we've already produced many. And I would want to point out again, perhaps in response to an earlier question about private finance, we do use private finance when appropriate. Aberdeen Western Peripheral Route and the M8, M73, M74 motorway improvements all include that, and that, again, the payments for that are identified. We've got to make sure we have value for money. There are limits to our borrowing. If people want us to use additional funding, then they would need to ensure that our borrowing areas and limits were increased. But we will be pursuing the A83 and the Inverness and Nairn, and obviously for the A77 and A75 there are constant improvements, but clearly the work in the bypasses on the A75 are important as well.
Edward Mountain, to be followed by Marie McNair.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And let me start off by saying I agree with the Cabinet Secretary. There should be a separate Transport Committee in this Parliament to overlook the projects. Now, the last section of the A9 to be dual will be the northern section. Yet again, that means the Highlands are coming last. According to the programme, 50% of the dualling will be done in the last 5 years. And not one bit of the A9 dualling that's been carried out so far, Cabinet Secretary, is carried out on time. Why should the Highlanders believe that you'll stick to your timetable, and can you outline the contingency plans should you not be reaching the deadlines you've set yourself?
Well, reflecting the points on the northern section, Tomatin to Moy is a northern section which is being worked on now. That will be in by the spring 2028, and the Dalradi to Slough by 2032. That will mean that on completion by 2032 there will be 38 miles from Inverness to Kincraig. I think in terms of the remainder of the 80, that's 38, that I think that would reassure him in terms of what's happening in the north. I think that's one of the significant changes with this. But clearly, as I mentioned, there will be an area, the Glencarry to Grubenmore, that is by the end of 2034. And I did say we are delivering the first sections to target.
Marie McNair, to be followed by Fergus Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Given how essential the A9 is to Scotland, it is vital that we improve the safety and reliability of this route for road users across the Highlands and beyond. But can the Cabinet Secretary update and expand on the recent discussions of the National Road Safety Strategic Partnership Board and outline the steps the Scottish Government is taking to drive forward safety improvements across Scotland's trunk road network?
Cabinet Secretary.
Specifically about the A9 and the A9 Safety Group, it continues to meet. Actually, some of the consequences of what I've just said in the statement about safety improvements comes from that. Any death on any of our roads is regrettable. I think there was one fatality on the A9 Perth to Inverness in the records that we have. They're operational records, so sometimes these can alter. But we do need to be vigilant constantly, and that is why I put a great deal of emphasis on road safety investment, and £12 million being spent on delivering casualty reduction measures and speed reductions on our trunk road network.
Fergus Ewing, to be followed by Jamie Hockerton.
The Tomatin Moy section was announced in 2001. It won't be completed until 2028 at the earliest. That's 7 years. There's 8 remaining sections. Do the maths. If there's similar delays, we're talking 275, not 235. And the Tomatin Moy section, when it was first tendered, got one offer of £170 million, which was regarded as too expensive. But the outturn figure was £310 million, or thereabouts. Now, does the Cabinet Secretary agree that there must be an examination of what went wrong, why Transport Scotland failed so abysmally, and will they recognise that there must be an inquiry by Audit Scotland into that scandal of gross abuse and failure by Transport Scotland to develop terms and conditions that produced competitive bids for the industry, a sine qua non of six.
So competitive bids are what is required. I think he is, again, selective, and I know he likes to dwell on the past, and I understand that. We have to learn the lessons of that, and then we have to move forward. That's what the 2023 delivery plan set out. And can I correct him? The Tomato and Tamoy procurement began in September 2023. The contract award was in 2024, and the dualling operation is due to be complete by spring 2028.
We've concluded 20 minutes, but I'm going to take the next 3 questions, but they will need to be brief, as will the responses. Jamie Halker-Johnson, to be followed by Douglas Ross.
Thank you. Communities living alongside the A9 have endured years of uncertainty over when work will start, often impacting on their ability to properly plan for the future. Many are concerned that when work finally does start, little consideration has been given to how this will take into account existing or planned work on major energy infrastructure projects in the area. So does the Cabinet Secretary recognise those concerns, and will she agree to come to the Highlands and meet with my constituents to hear those concerns first-hand?
Cabinet Secretary.
So in relation to the A9 and providing certainty, that's what we're trying to do, to set out for his constituents and indeed the constituents of all members across the Highlands and area in terms of what that will mean for their area and what will happen locally. I think that's really essential, and that community involvement is really important. I've been asked by a number of members to look into issues for individual constituents. I think the point about energy and planning is really important, which is why I, as a Cabinet Secretary for Transport, have been encouraging and ensuring that Transport Scotland is engaging, particularly with our renewable sector, because obviously different plans, whether it's he's maybe talking about the actual delivery, I'm talking about the transportation requirements, but it is an absolutely essential part of our infrastructure planning. So I'm very cognizant to what he said. He can write into me to explain what it is that he's particularly seeking me to do, but I am in regular correspondence, not least the First Minister and others who have got constituency interests along the A9 about the interests of their individual constituents.
Douglas Ross, to be followed by David Russell.
I realise the statements about the A9, but the Cabinet Secretary herself has mentioned the A96 in her answers. Given these two roads are very much linked, given that many people travelling up the A9 then go on to the A96, if we're supposed to believe the earlier correction to the record that the SNP are still committed to dualling the A96 in full, can the Cabinet Secretary tell us when?
Cabinet Secretary.
So in relation to the A9 and the connection to the A96, clearly the inches to Smithton is an important part of that, and that's where the budget has provided for the early works in terms of the advanced works to take place, similarly to the Nairn bypass. Clearly, what we'll need to look at is the procurement method, and that would determine what phases of the A9 can be developed and when. But our commitment is to the full dualling of the A96. It is unwavering, and in terms of the work, and the pressures on the fiscal position, we've set out, and I've set out on the Inverness to Nairn aspects that we'd expect that advanced construction, as I said early on, and certainly in terms of construction work procurement will take place in the next spending review, and you'd see construction of those two parts during the next spending review, and at the same time we'll be working on the progress improvements eastwards, including on the Elgin bypass, and steps in taking forward an Elgin bypass will include further route development.
And briefly, David Russell.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. After 18 years, we are now promised in 9 more years we will finally have the dual A9, costing between £16 and £30 million per kilometre. That's 50% more than the going rate, and I'm telling you from experience. I was just wondering if it was golden nuggets or asphalt we were actually using. Does the government not see that something's not right here? 20 years of delays in the North East being deprived of billions in economic growth, also countless lives being lost on a road not fit for purpose. Presiding Officer, the Scottish people deserve better. Can the Minister or can the Cabinet Secretary explain why costs are extremely well above the going rate?
So anybody, and I'm sure from the members' experience, will know that construction costs and construction inflation has been particularly problematic over recent years. If he wants, and I agree with him, capital infrastructure is a real driver for economic growth. So I think if he can speak to his Westminster counterparts and the Labour UK government to ensure this Parliament, this government gets more capital, we can drive ahead our infrastructure projects. In the meantime, we'll shore our resources appropriately and deliver in this, as I have set out in the statement today.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes this item of business. There will be a brief pause before we move to the next item of business to allow front benches to change.